Well, I'm a big fan of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, which I have now seen twice. You and I saw it together, and I've seen it now on a really, really big screen. And there are a number of reasons I like it. And let's start first with Felicity Jones. She talked in that interview about getting the physicality of the camera right, of the character right, getting the stance of the character right, and it was very interesting. She was describing, somebody who was sort of downtrodden, but is, sort of put on this brave face. And one of the things that her stance, her physical stance, reminded me of was Sigourney Weaver's Ripley in Aliens, because people think of Aliens, they think of the last section of it, her with the gun and get away from her and all that stuff. But actually what happens in the course of Aliens, which there's more similarities, because this is basically a war movie built around the journey of a central female character. But with Felicity Jones has, very wide eyes, and which sort of indicate the pain, the inner pain and trauma of her characters when she needs to, but also she has this thing, the stance of film, which is very much chin forward, head up, chin forward, and an awful lot of what about the way in which Jin develops is to do with the way she stands. And I thought it was terrific that you spoke about that in the interview, because people only ever talk about the lines that people deliver, and so much of it is to do with, she walks the walk as well as she talks the talk. And that walk changes during the course of the film. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, whenever you get something like this, which is a curlicue, a spin-off, a tangential series, there is always the worry about, well, is this just going to be a cash-in? Actually, I think what's really good about Rogue One is that it's taken advantage of the fact that it exists in a known space, as they said at the beginning. It's inspired by a line at the beginning of the opening crawl of, about rebels looking for plans of the Death Star. But because it's its own story, it can have its own beginning, middle, and end. And it doesn't simply... What happens sometimes from the other episodes is that you feel... the prequels I was never a fan of anyway. But there are sometimes the case with those, because you feel that we're having to get from point A to point B, and then from point B to point C, and we're having to introduce it. And there's an awful lot of things that just feel like setting up franchise. In the case of this, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like, here are a group of characters, here is a narrative, this is the way the narrative is going to go. You may know, in the same way as with a World War II movie, that who wins in the end, because but that doesn't mean that within the mechanics, the particular mechanics of the story, you don't know where everything is going. And I think that they really took advantage of that, and it means that you get a really socking third act, which not only is exciting because it has fights, and an awful lot of it kind of evokes beach scenes from Normandy or cinematic representations of Vietnam, the war movie stuff. I remember hearing one of the casts talking about, watching Apocalypse Now over and over again. You can see that influence in it. And Dirty Dozen has obviously been an influence as well. But you can see all those things. And when you get to that third act, it really is, and particularly if you see it on a good big screen, it really is solid, pulse-rating stuff. Up until that point, however, what it manages to do is to develop characters in a way that is engaging and is funny, and also, if you want to find a political subtext, seems to me to do one of the things that science fiction is brilliant at doing, is imagining worlds in which the problems of contemporary society, when gender balances and race balance simply don't apply. So fantastic for a start to see a really properly diverse cast, British actors and Mexican actors and men, women, equal footing, and, really, but never in a way that makes it feel like it was in any way crowded, but it feels completely organic. It feels like it's the result of people who have envisaged a more egalitarian world and have put that more egalitarian world on screen. And I thought that was great. It gave you a real sense that this was a movie being made with some sense of heart, not a movie that was being made as some kind of franchise fodder. When it comes to Gareth Edwards, I've always been a fan of his anyway, and having cut his teeth on Monsters, the key with Monsters was it was a film which was ironically titled, because although technically it's a creature feature, it's a film about monsters. Actually, it's not. It's a film about those two people in a world in which there are monsters, but the monsters may not be the extraterrestrials. It's to do with, everything else that's going on at ground level. So he's very concerned about letting characters find their own space. And even though this is essentially, war movie in space, what he does is he makes sure that even when you're in the heat of battle, even when you're doing the thing about cross-cutting between different sections, which can often be completely discombobulating, he keeps you focused on who everyone is, where they are, what they're doing. Now, the other thing is that there's been all these stories about, because they had to do extensive reshoots, and that often means that something is a compromised vision. I have to say, having seen the film twice now, it does not, for me, have any of the scars of post-production battles. It is dark when it needs to be. It has the strength of its convictions in terms of, it's not as crowd-pleasingly upbeat as, for example, Force Awakens. I think it is a much darker film, much more in line with The Empire Strikes Back, which is, of course, the high watermark to which all Star Wars movies aspire. Plus, it does a very good job of having cutting-edge CGI, but it feels like it comes from the period of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. It feels like that old kind of movie. I saw it with a teenager who at the end...
Any old teenager?
My son. And at the end of this, the second time I'd seen it, and we both turned to each other and literally went, wow.
Which is about as long a conversation you'll get.
Exactly.
Probably.
Yeah. Then he went, when are we eating?
All the correspondence which you sent in on Rogue One, and more, very welcome. Did you think we visited too many planets very early on?
It didn't bother me.
Okay. I need to see it again.